the team comes forward, project-based learning. So I've been very, very pleased as I've been able to get into more schools. We have some great work in this area, so it's important for the board to hear about our project-based learning initiatives. I mean, schools such as the conservatory, all of our academies. I mean, there's just great things happening. As a former principal of a high school, which its entire focus is on project-based learning, and this is a great presentation from the board to understand our reach and to educate the board. So, Mr. Oswald, at this time is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy. At a former workshop on the conservatory school, the issue of project-based learning came up, and the board requested a workshop on project-based learning. So we want to go a little bit deeper today on project-based learning. There are numerous studies that exist around the PBL approach and how that supports really academic achievement and providing a world-class education for our students, which is in alignment here with our vision and mission as a school district. This project-based learning work also aligns very closely with our strategic plan and a number of initiatives that are outlined here around instructional programming, really to meet the individual needs of our students. So here today we do have a number of individuals, Dr. Pincos, Assistant Superintendent of Global Education, Dr. Licata, Assistant Superintendent of Choice Innovation, Dr. Johnson, who is the Director of School Choice, Principal Terry Stupas of the Conservatory School, and Julia May, who is our STEM resident expert in our curriculum department, who will take us deeper into project-based learning as it exists not only at Conservatory School, but throughout, as the superintendent mentioned, throughout our district. So, Dr. Licata.
So before we begin, some of the basis of this work is with a group called the Buck Institute, but they're also called PBL Works. I certainly like PBL because it's my initials as well, so it's easy to remember. Ms. Stupas has come in because that initiated our conversation about 2 months ago, and Dr. Fenoy was quick to the draw and let everyone know that we do this everywhere, and she does it school-wide, and we want to make sure that the one of the best principals we have doing that is available to speak on it. She was given tight restraints and constraints as we move through this, but we're going to transition through this, and we're going to let the folks that cover these areas speak to it directly. But these circles are what you start with. This is the base, it's the foundation, and the rock of what project-based learning is, and it is the gold standard. So we'll get back to that at the end when we talk about challenges and where we're heading.
Good afternoon. I just have to say the last time I was here was 14 years ago when you made me a principal, so it's going good so far, so just let you know that. All right, I can speak to project-based learning as it exists at the Conservatory School. That's my expertise, so I'm going to share that with you this afternoon. Project-based learning, it becomes the ethos of the school. It is not it doesn't happen during a time period or a day of the week. It is immersed into everything or baked into the community, as we like to say, of the school. It drives systems and instruction. It drives what the design of the master board is in order to provide the support for students to have the opportunity to have deeper learning. You will see it in the hallways. It is how we honor learning for students. Instead of having awards assemblies, we have presentations of learning and celebrations of learning. So it really does impact all areas of the school. PBL and inquiry, and I use those words interchangeably because you have to participate in an inquiry mindset in order to do project-based learning. It is held tightly by the whole community, parents, teachers, students. It is a way of looking at learning and a way of experiencing learning in a deeper way. We pass it from peer-to-peer teachers in an onboarding process that over the last few years has been supported by Louise Grant and the Pew Fund, so we're very thankful for that. But we onboard our own teachers. It is a discussion when we interview teachers that life is going to be different at the Conservatory School, and this is how we are going to provide lessons to our students and to get ready for that ride, and that we will give them support to do that. In a PBL setting, content is integrated, not siloed. And I mentioned a minute ago about the master board and that it has an impact, particularly in middle school, and our master board and how we develop that, because you're going to have your math teacher teaching with your civics teacher with 7th graders that they share. And I'm going to read this because I don't know this study yet for them. Understanding the development of the political self and demonstrating their learning in the computational design of nesting objects using Russian nesting dolls. That is the PBL that they're working on right now. I haven't seen it yet because exhibition is next week, so I'll be able to take a look at what that is. But in any case, it is 2 teachers working together that share standards, share students, and combining their content, develop a project where students can learn about both dance and social science, both art and math, and the projects support both sets of standards for those students. Collaboration is a natural, normal part for all participants, teachers, but especially for students. And that is taught beginning in kindergarten as a basic skill. Empathy, flexibility, persistence, resilience, optimism, these are some of the beginning stances that are taught. So children learn from the earliest ages to work independently, collaboratively, to exercise their inborn curiosity, and to feel secure in trying out new things. The 100 languages of children, that's a concept that comes from Reggio Emilia, and that means that we allow students to express themselves in a variety of self-selected ways. So that can be via design, technology, art, poetry, dance, construction, spoken word, or a number of different ways that kids can show you what they've learned. So that's from kindergarten to 8th grade. That's part of the practice. And then the final step is the exhibition of learning, and that's where we teach children about aiming for that high quality, because you're going to have a public audience. The student is the exhibit, so their ability to talk about their learning, to present it to multiple adults, to be challenged and questioned in a 1 hour setting that these students run by themselves, and to be able to stand up to that, and then afterward to reflect on it. How did I, what happened that was new to me? How did I need to improve to do this the next time? So the reflection is just as important. And children that are at a school that is project-based grow up in this setting, so they start doing that from age 5. I have no idea how to change a slide here. Okay. The next slide is just a little bit, and this is actually from our summer onboarding that the Pew Fund supports, this graphic. This is an example of a 2nd grade documentation of learning and the process. And this particular one started with an entry event or a launch where students, and these are 2nd graders, a read aloud was happening in their class of the one and only Ivan. They were also looking at webcams from zoos across the country and around the world. So these emerging events or entry events is what sparks the students' interest in a particular topic. So the question came in this particular class of, should there be zoos? So this is, again, that guiding question that students are now ready to investigate and to interview professionals and to make visits and to go deeper in the learning. And at the same time, you can see the number of standards that they're meeting during this process. As teachers plan for project-based learning experiences, they start with their standards. And upon occasion, they meet with their students and say, these are the standards we need to learn. How should we approach a project with these particular standards? And the students become co-creators with their teachers in the projects that they're going to present. Documentation of learning by the teacher is a very important element. This is what teachers share in, in the hallways, in their classrooms, because we're always looking for ways to share information with other teachers and grow everyone at the same time, to grow the community. So the last slide, the child is the center, and this is the most important part of project-based learning. Is it's built around children. It is an equity. It has the soul of equity. We are talking about a process that is available for all children, for all grades, for all abilities. Children who participate in inquiry and project-based learning feel like they belong and that they are capable of presenting and speaking and participating in the whole function of project-based learning. The community is also a part of it, and one of the things that we hear from our parents all the time is, my child went home this weekend and wanted to go to Home Depot because they wanted to build a structure to climb in the backyard because they've been doing this in their classroom, and so it permeates not only the school but also the parents and the community, and they want to try these things at home. So kids know that learning just doesn't stop at the classroom, that it goes everywhere. Voice. PBL helps children see and feel that their voices matter. Sometimes we say to give them a voice. We don't need to give anyone a voice. We need to let them know their voice matters. I don't know if that was a ding for me. Impact.
Pretend it was.
Pretend it was. Okay, quick. Impact. You said 2 minutes. Impact. The powerful feeling of difference making. And this is the key. When kids are creating a project that says, look, I'm in kindergarten, but all this garbage is going down the drains on our school, and they can point out how many of those sewer drains are on the school campus and where they're going and track it on a map, and they know how it's going to the intercoastal. And now they are going to teach fourth graders to not drop their trash outside. So they know they have impact and that they can have impact in the world. And the last thing, ethic of excellence, and that is in everything we do, whether it's with teachers or children or the school. And one of my favorite authors around project-based learning is Ron Berger. He's also a Harvard Project Zero professor, and he says, we can't first build the students' self-esteem and then build their work. It is through their work that their self-esteem will grow. So that is a belief system of ours, and I have to say that when a child enters a culture where high-quality projects are celebrated, they become part of that ethic, and they assume it becomes part of them. And a culture of inquiry and PBL honors teachers too, and if I have to say, it is the best recruitment tool for getting teachers to work in a school community. Thank you.
Hey, how do I follow that? So, as Ms. Stupas has already said, she used the term ethos. And so in career and technical education and within our IB programs, project-based learning, or sometimes we refer to problem-based learning, is a natural fit. We like to say it's a part of the construction, it's a part of the recipe, it's a part of the pattern of what we do in these programs. When it comes to IB, students are focusing on those critical thinking skills, those problem-solving skills. They're looking to investigate and find solutions to real-world problems with an added emphasis of a global significance. I was just at Atlantic High School today and got to take a look at some of the things that some of the students are doing in the IB program there. When it comes to career and technical education, I mean, that's what career and technical education does. So when it comes to a project and project-based learning with CTE, that project could very end up being students who have been paired with an executive chef from the Hilton, and they're presenting to a community of people alongside representatives from the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. It could be the students at Seminole Ridge who are partnering with construction companies and Habitat for Humanity, involving the community and actually building that final project, which is a home for someone to live in. I could go on, but when we talk about project-based learning, it is the ethos, or if you will, the natural part of what we do with our IB programs and also within career and technical education.
So one of the programs that we've currently been offering is STEMspiration, which is a partnership with Discovery Education. Currently, we have 3 operating cohorts, which involves 7 elementary schools and 7 middle schools. I would like to say thank you to the Pew Public Education Fund for believing in us and funding our first cohort, which ranges from pre-K to 5th grade. The schools participating currently in this program include Grassy Waters Elementary, Loxahatchee Groves, Hidden Oaks, Northmore Elementary, Liberty Park, Palmetto, Grove Park, Yega, Roosevelt, Village Academy, Palm Springs Middle, Pahokee Middle, H.L. Watkins, and Carver. This program seeks to energize minds through a transdisciplinary approach to learning while incorporating the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity, while connecting to real-world problems and links to careers through inquiry and project-based learning, as well as developmentally appropriate practices. 4 to 7 STEM teacher innovators from each of the participating schools receive 5 days of professional development and ongoing job-embedded coaching. This is a multi-year program because research tells us that it takes 80 hours of ongoing professional development over 2 years to change pedagogy, and 160 hours of professional development over the course of 3 years to change a culture. Administrators also receive professional development and coaching through this program. Instead of asking children what they want to be when they grow up, this program asks students what problems they want to solve. According to the World Economic Forum Future Jobs Report, the top skills for employment in 2022 list analytical thinking and innovation, critical thinking and analysis, complex problem solving, technology design and programming, active learning and learning strategies, ability to communicate and work collaboratively. Students need to understand how what they are learning in schools work together to solve problems, not in isolation. This is why project-based learning, inquiry, and STEM are essential to our ecosystem. In addition to our STEMspiration program, the K-12 STEM department, choice and career options, and educational technology departments provide ongoing professional development and coaching to teachers, principals, and administrators interested in growing into a project-based learning. And that is a journey. Doesn't happen overnight. It's growth and change over time. Integrated units and lessons have been developed for K-8 teachers to model how standards-based instruction can be taught through driving questions, inquiry, integration of subjects, utilization of real-world problems, and connections to careers, as well as having that exhibition and that showcase of their work and being able to communicate what they have done and why they've made their choices. Through project-based learning, we are all working together to empower all students with the skills that will enable them to solve tomorrow's challenges, regardless of the field they choose to pursue.
Well, hi, everybody. This is kind of a continuation to, in May of last year, I came to talk to you about Asia Society, and then the question is, how does Asia Society fit into this world? But project-based learning is very much part of Asia Society. And what I think it's important to call your attention to is that the work of project-based learning is a continuum, that it can be reached through many different goals and different opportunities. But the idea that always has to be at the base of it is that it is what the Buck Institute always says, is that it is not for dessert, but it's the main meal. So it's not that we do a little project at the end of a unit, but it is the main meal. It is how we teach. It is how students think. So Asia Society, and just to remind everybody that even though the name is Asia Society, started as just to look at Asia, but it has become one of the most notorious global education centers in the world, and they have offices in many of the countries in Europe and Africa and Asia. We have formed a partnership with them, and this basically how it fits with project-based learning. If you can look into the graph that you have, the students are taught to investigate the world and to really look at things that happen in the world that have impact in other places in the world. And I think that was a good example of that was the crisis of 2008 of the United States, the economical crisis. It really impacted the whole world. And it continues to, any of these ripples that happens in one place has an impact in other places. So we want to make sure that students understand and have the ability to investigate the world and understand how one thing has an impact on something else. We also want them to recognize perspectives, and now of all the times in our history, I think it's an important because they have to recognize their own perspectives, but also recognize that the other people have perspectives and they may not share those perspectives. And how do they are able to communicate even though they don't share the same perspectives, and how do they take action? So again, it's not a program, it's a framework, and the framework it works with content, but also with pedagogy. So it's not just that the students know these facts, but also how do they know how to interact with these facts. It's inquiry-based, like everybody else has said, student-led, and it is, the difference with the Global Education Network is that it is aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Goals. Where do we have it? We have it in Jupiter Middle School. They're finishing the first year of planning. And I have to tell you a quick story about Jupiter Middle. I went to visit, and I welcome anybody to visit there. And I looked at 3 kids the kids were divided in groups of 3s. And I went to them and I said, so what are you doing? And they said, well, we each have to choose a country, and we are triangulating 3 variables. One of them is the level of poverty of the country, the level of what are their agricultural resources and their political system. And we're trying to look from those 3 variables, what are the trends that we can study, and what are how one thing causes the other. So I asked the student, what country did you choose? And he said, Madagascar. So at some point in the conversation, I stopped asking a kid about a project. I was actually asking a peer information. So I said, so what do they grow in Madagascar? And he said, he gave me a slew of things, and I said, are they do they export? And he says, no, most of it is internal consumption, and they just export vanilla. So, I mean, it was just very interesting that they were able to have those conversations. And these are middle school kids. We have extended it to Jupiter Elementary School with thanks to Louise Grant and her vision and the funds from the Pew Foundation, and to Melaleuca Elementary. What we are trying to do is to embed this work within languages and also within careers. So in Jupiter Middle School and Jupiter Elementary, they're working with cybersecurity. So that it is a pattern, a feeder pattern up to Jupiter High School. In Melaleuca, it's just a dream that I've had for a long time, is a diplomacy. They're thinking about being a diplomacy school, and they're working with students from Africa, doing projects with students from Africa. And actually on April 17th, they're going to have a collaboration of students from Africa and Melaleuca. They're going to talk about some of the projects that they've been working on. And I left you with a quote from the Asia Society that really explains why this work is so important as a global citizen.
So, wrapping things up, moving forward, I think one of our biggest projects moving forward is something that our superintendent brought back with him from Atlanta that we were able to visit, and the 3DE program, Junior Achievement. That is strictly a problem-based or project-based program that is significant. We're going to see a successful opening in a few months at Lake Worth High. It's all founded in creating, establishing, solving problems, doing it worldly, doing with local businesses. And we look forward to that. But we need to expand it some more. It's not in silos, but it is extended into mainly our academies, and it really is part of what TCS does and everything they do up there. But as you can see, it is everywhere. We do want to align it with standards. We know the importance of aligning everything with standards that we do, because that's part of our strategic plan. We want to make sure that we're focused on educating the children what we have to do. We are continuing with Blender instructions and lessons in there. That's important so the teachers are able to reach in and grab them out immediately. And our curriculum, and working with the STEM team down there with Julia, that they are adding more and more as we move along. And finally, this just doesn't happen without teachers being developed professionally. It's not just something that I'm pretty sure they don't teach at our local universities. It's a craft. And we have some phenomenal teachers, and I know Teresa's been very, very good at having folks walk in and having her teachers share their knowledge, and we're going to extend that, and we're going to work you a little bit more, but it benefits everybody. It's not, we don't want to see this in just one location, but we do have some challenges as we move forward. The professional development idea, when do you fit it in, and how are the resources behind it? Once again, we're going to thank the Pew Foundation over there for the 10th time, because it's still not enough, and the Moran Foundation at TCS. So they've been instrumental in making sure our project-based learning stays afloat. Fidelity. There's two pieces to this fidelity part. First, we have to create that matrix that says what is fidelity and how does it look. And then the other piece is who monitors it. How is it really being done the right way? So there's two pieces of that fidelity and time. I think we've all heard enough conversations in this room about how little time teachers have actually to teach and how we can develop that and integrate it and penetrate what we do now that we're required to do. So that's going to be one of the significant pieces, but it's something that we are going to move forward on. It meets the diverse learner skills. I know you saw in one of those slides one of those young men there that had a smile as big as they get. I'm sure he's very happy there. And but it is good what we do, but we have to be better at it right now.
Thank you. Mrs. Whitfield, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on the phone. I wanted to ask a couple questions. I'll just say them all and then go back on hold. But the first question I had was, are there any instances when it isn't prudent for us to replicate something like what's going on at the North Palm Conservatory, which I guess is conservatory, which is, I guess, project-based throughout the whole school? And then I was wondering about the STEMspiration program that you were talking about. In that program, is it also school-wide, or is it just in a certain class? And then as we are going forward with this replication, do we have any other plans of doing a whole school similar to what's going on at the conservatory school, or is it being done kind of in a little bit more piecemeal right now? Thank you.
And so, Dr. Licata, I think you're going to take the first question.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, Ms. Whitfield. Hope you're feeling better. Whole school-wise, is it good or bad? I think this depends upon the leadership, depends upon the staff, and how much you can get done with the current staff that you have without muddying it up. It has to be done true. It has to be done effectively. So whole school, and I know that Ms. Stupas has worked incredibly hard over the last few years to make it whole school. So it's not something I think you can just drop in on a school and say it's successful and we're doing it everywhere. You really have to work, and it has to start with the professional development piece to make sure it's done in the right way, and it does integrate with our standards. The second question I'm going to leave to Ms. Mate, because it's about STEMspirations.
The STEMspiration program ideally is a multi-year program. Those STEM innovators are taught to be leaders within their community, and the goal in year 2 is that they bring on someone else in their school to help teach and train them. They're also part of the assignments are to bring professional development back to their school. So over the course of the 3 to 4 years, the goal is to turn the entire school, and that's why there's also coaching for administration.
And just on the last question, I think to reiterate what Dr. Licata said, is that there has to be a readiness level at a school. There has to be a level of capacity that has to be built, as Dr. Licata said, around professional development. So replication, whether it's the TCS or any of these models that we discussed today, is really dependent upon, one, the leadership at a school, that schools are ready. There's a dependency here that teachers are working and planning together these particular units out. So again, each school is unique in its readiness level to take on this work. So I wouldn't say that it's not good at replication. It depends on the school and its ability to work through all the nuances to make this happen. Ms. Stupas, I think it's fair to say that this has been a journey for her and her school to make that happen. I don't know if you want to add to that question.
Well, I think one of the most important things is the support of the leadership at the school. That's whatever school you're going to do this in, that the leadership gets support, that the leadership is supportive. There is, I call it home cooking rather than opening, going through the drive-through, because you have to write these lessons. These lessons have to be developed. It is a lot of collaborative work between teachers to develop this, so it really does need leadership that's going to support that, and time to be provided, and nothing turns out perfectly the first time, so you have to have a place where you feel safe making mistakes and you can try and do those types of things. So, developing that kind of atmosphere in a school first has to happen for it to grow, I think, in any case, for any program.
Thank you.
And can I follow up with that and just say, are there any students that don't benefit from a project-based learning environment?
I don't believe so. I think it's for everyone.
I believe in the academies, it's what really draws them into it, and some of those projects, especially when you look at Park Vista's auto mechanics, you look at some of our cybersecurities and our app technology classes where they are marketing their own new apps and making them out there in the public, and hopefully they get swooped up by iTunes or Apple iTunes, so Mr. Barbieri's son or grandson can buy some on his credit card.
And most of the research that with project-based learning shows that it benefits all students, and we can share some of that research with the board.
Thank you. Ms. Brill and then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, and I have a question. I'm going to give you a little background, but I actually did look into the research, and it's still very new, but as Dr. Pinko said, it's international. There's no question. And I became very excited about project-based learning and fascinated by it because my daughter is teaching middle school in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and she just traveled last week to Chile to introduce them to the projects they're doing. And they are a whole school, but it's smaller. It is a challenge when you have a larger school to have the whole school on project-based learning. Dr. Pincos, you answered some of my questions because I thought maybe there's a way with our dual language schools that when they go project-based that they can work internationally with, get in touch with other countries that are doing it. And I know my daughter may wind up in Africa, so she may be one of those that we work with. Her school, though, it's interesting, they switch projects every 2 weeks. I thought that was really fast. Do we have a standard rule as to how the projects rotate, or do we, it depends on what the subject is?
So you're looking at those first gold standards and all those strategies and effective instruction, as well as the domains that they have from the Buck PBL works. But I think that's more of a feel and more of a leadership, as you see. Ms. Stupas, can you extend?
There can be. We have in our middle school, there are 2 semester-long projects, but then there's also mini projects that happen in between. So it's the philosophy of how you learn something, not necessarily whether it's this one or that one, but there are mini projects, mini experiences, and then longer ones as well.
And as a follow-up, the feedback that I got from my daughter was that she felt it was kind of too short, those 2 weeks, that, sometimes you're really rushing through it. But to Ms. Whitfield's question about all students, I've converted my way of thinking about learning, and I would hope, again, that all students, whether they're in the ELL programs, whether they're in the ESC programs, whatever they're in, because it doesn't matter what level a student is at. They can participate no matter where they are in there, and it's diverse in the diversity of the student population. So I'm looking forward to us growing this. I know it's going to take a lot of work, but I'm very excited, and thank you.
I wanted to add that the key and the most effective project-based learning and most effective projects are the ones that come from the heart of the kids. So if they are able to identify a problem that is relevant to them and is meaningful to them, those are the best projects. And usually it is around the community, but the community could be as large as the world. So and sometimes those projects are very small, and like I saw one of them did a project on an announcement to save pets. So that could be very small or it could be very big. But the main idea is to bring in the whole student and to bring it to be a relevant thing for the students.
Dr. Licata mentioned earlier about the 3DE that we're launching at Lake Worth High. One of the unique things about that is they're not calling it project-based learning by that title, but the students are going to have case studies incorporated, and these case studies are going to be working alongside a company out in the community. So while the students may not come up with the project, they are coming up with some solutions that are going to help some company out in the real world solve a problem.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Just first a couple questions and comments. So first is, what country in Africa is Melaleuca collaborating with?
Zimbabwe.
Okay, great.
At this time, but we also have contacts with Ghana, and we also have contacts with Nigeria. So we actually invited the ministers of education of those 3 countries to the National Association of Bilingual Education to speak and to increase that partnership.
Okay. And I really just asked that question so we are more specific in our language.
Right.
Because I would hope that they're not saying we have a collaboration with North America. Right?
No, I know.
Okay.
I understand that. But at the
Okay.
same time, we do have 3 countries that we're working with.
And so then I think Mrs. Whitfield was like in my brain because she asked some of my questions, but to follow up on the question about the way I heard it, the way I'm thinking it is it best to have whole school inquiry-based learning? And I'm going to say the answer is yes, absolutely. Now, whether the adults are ready to step into that space is the rate limiting factor. So I don't want to act like it's not good because it's fantastic. We just, as you said, require a lot of professional development. And I'm really I'm trying to train my brain to call it inquiry-based learning because some of what I heard, especially from you, Dr. Pincos, is what I would call inquiry-based learning, right? Some of what I heard, I don't hear it that way, and maybe that's just my limitation. You know, when I visit schools, the overwhelming majority of the schools, I do not see inquiry-based activities. And it troubles me. Now, and as I've said before, I have 2 grandchildren that go to the conservatory school. When my son visited the school, he decided he was going to move from St. Lucie County in hopes that his children would get in that school, right? And the only word I can say is it is freedom. The children are not sitting in place in their station and go to the next place, right? It is freedom. And when I visit, it took me a while. I'm almost used to all the movement in the school, and I'm almost used to all the conversation the children are having around what they're working on. I don't know if I'm going to get used to children laying on the ground with their iPads, right? But they're learning. It's just fantastic. And it, you know, and I like cry with joy when I go see my 1st grade grandson at his exhibition, and they're doing national parks, and he's doing the Grand Canyon, and it's just like yada, 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 you know. But he learned, and okay, so that's my testimony. But let me just say, so when, you know, my comparison is the conservatory and high-tech high, right? Now, this fantastic experience that my grandchildren are having, I want all children to have that kind of experience. And so I realize that that's like pie in the sky, but I would like to see us outline a timeline to how we move there. I think that we have a few schools that we are contemplating moving into whole school inquiry-based learning. And so I think that we need to have a roadmap on how we get the adults there. The kids are ready. But what's the roadmap, and what are the resources that will be required to get there? And then after we get that and we have that roadmap as a template, then how do we expand it more and more, whether it's through the Asia societies or whatever, but just so that more and more children have this freedom of learning experience, because I just don't see it. I'm going to specifically visit the schools and ask for the STEMspiration program. I have visited several of those schools, and I have not seen that freedom. Maybe I just didn't make it into those classrooms, but I have not seen it, and I want all children to have it. And the last thing I'm going to say right now is, well, 2 things. So one is, this is about power. There's a difference in these classrooms. So the typical classroom, the teacher has the power and is telling the children what you must learn and what you must do. In these inquiry-based classrooms that I've seen, the children have the power. And as Dr. Pinko said, they're guiding what they want to learn, or they're deciding, and the teacher is guiding so that they in fact learn. And and when I went to High Tech High, I sat in a session with one of the teachers who walked through that process. So maybe I have a wee bit more understanding of it. But how the students decided what the social justice issue was that they want to address, and the teacher helped guide, and all the work that was required by the teacher in order to help guide the students in this learning process, right? And they did some work with homelessness. And while we were there, I saw a demonstration of second graders. And the one that I always will remember is a little boy who appeared to me to be Mexican. I don't know, appeared to me to be Mexican. He had a sketch map of the United States prior to the Spanish-American War. And it said, "We did not cross the border. The border crossed us." Now imagine what this second grader had to learn to come up with that. Just imagine all that. It was just fantastic. And so, I'll do a commercial for you. I'm just here to tell you, right? I just think it is so fantastic. It is freedom of learning. And so after we get this pilot, so to speak, down and we expand, I'm telling you, I want all children to experience that kind of freedom of learning. And I don't know how we get there, how fast we can get there, but I'm going to ask you, Dr. Licata, to outline the roadmap, right?
Wrote it 3 times.
Okay.
Because that's the only way to get there. If we don't set that goal, we'll never get there. So Terry and I have been talking a lot these last few weeks, and we're both in agreement that we can put that together real soon.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in conclusion of my testimonial, so one of the things, this conversation came about as a result of the conservatory and the issue related to the high school, right? And the thought of children who have been raised in this freedom of thinking environment, then going into a school that does not have that framework for learning is frightening, right? And so I just kind of want to know, Mr. Superintendent, do you need any affirmations from the board to move forward with figuring out how we get a high school for high school for the conservatory school, or children in K-8 in inquiry-based learning environments? I just want to know how we're going to get to high school.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so, no, we don't need any affirmations. It's just we've talked about it as a team. The conversation is absolutely not dead. There's all the logistics of, the bureaucracy of a school system. Money, where, who. The point that you've made and many people have made, your biggest challenge is literally balancing the realities of human capital and their ability to execute versus the accountability metrics that we're held accountable to every day. That's your tension point. And so, as a high school principal who ran a project-based learning high school, that was the constant battle. The biggest issue, especially at the secondary level, is literally how do you get teachers who are making $100,000 in the real world to come do that work in the teaching setting when we don't pay them that much money. And so what happens if you build a program at a high school, say some sort of project-based learning engineering program, and you have these fantastic teachers, there comes this point where you're almost held hostage. Because if Deborah Robinson is teaching in the Medical Academy and she builds this robust program, and then she leaves, what do you do? And so it's always being really cognizant of your ability to bring in highly qualified teachers, and that is scalable. It's always about the scale is the issue. So if you have 5 schools and you need to find highly qualified teachers to teach engineering or whatever subject in those 5 schools, can we find people of that quality? Or do you consolidate that and then try to bring it down? So it's always that healthy teacher. So to answer your question, we're still working on it. Mr. Osborne and I have talked about it, but we still need to figure out the basics. It's basically basic Maslow. Where, who, and will they come? Yep. So yes.
Yes, go ahead. Last one. Mrs. McQuinn would like to speak.
Well, then I hold for Mrs. McQuinn.
Mrs. McQuinn, go ahead.
Okay, I can remember this. I'm tagging on to some of Dr. Robinson's comments. So it's kind of a run along. What do you call that? It's the sentence that never stops. So, high tech high. I'm going to use a school like William T. Dwyer High School as an example. I don't know that you could ever get a large high school. It has the pieces that many students want, such as the big athletic teams that you can't necessarily field at a smaller school. But they very much have in their finance academy,
ROTC.
they very much have, if not a project-based learning environment, they have a problem-based learning environment. So part of what you had mentioned earlier is that we don't market that as such. But part of what we have to figure out is, in a district our size, and the state pretty much forces us into this because of funding, we have these big high schools. So we almost have to work school within a school. And I know that that's intimidating for a lot of students who are leaving. You know, they're intimidated to go from elementary school to middle school and then from middle school to a large high school. And we've talked about that in the past. And I don't have an answer to that, but I do know that there was a time, and you know, history repeats itself. There was a time when I know there's a question here. There was a time when we had, for example, a 9th grade, right? We can do, and Ms. Brill said she was in a school within a school. Number one, marketed as such, but then how do we look at our large high schools, and I'm specific to high school? Are there other schools we can visit? You know, what are the barriers for having that? Knowing that we're not allowed to build right now. We don't have the funds to build a ton of small student population high schools. That was the question. How do we do that, and are we visiting other schools? Thank you.
I think it's also important for all of us to realize, you know, anytime you start getting into project-based learning, the costs are just a real conversation. I think our context, we are very lucky to have great business partners and family foundations that support us, that allow us to incubate these ideas. I mean, we are very blessed. And so that's something we need to continue to highlight, continue to support, and ask for even more support. I think when you think about the 3DE project at Lake Worth High School, you know, here's an opportunity for the business partner to have a direct connection to be involved with us in this work, direct. And when we meet with the business community, a lot of them ask, like, how do I get involved? How do I get involved? Then there's another reality, you know, part of we're also being asked as a community of educators and a board, you know, how are we preparing people for the real world and the workforce? Like, this is a real interesting tension point, right? So, you know, one, I applaud the freedoms that Dr. Robinson is describing. I think my baby girl is going to need that. Donald doesn't need that. You know, it's one of these, like, so it's how do we create different options and choices? You know, Donald doesn't need that inquiry-based learning, because what he'll do is whatever he can read in the textbook, he'll learn it, and then he'll move on, and then the inquiry-based stuff is what we're fortunate enough to provide as a family to go out to these different experiences, to touch the work, right? And so we just have to I think that's what we have to keep having dialogues like this. Yep. You know, the board has to continue to pressure us to create the roadmap. But at some point, we have to make some tough choices. And I'm being very clear on this. I mean, even our conversations with the university system, how many educators are trained and graduate with a degree on how to do this work? We're asked to do it after you almost have to undo what they've been taught and then find a capable leader like Ms. Stupas and others who can then reteach them the work in this new way. But the adult has to be willing to let go of it. And so it's again, but we have to be honest and continue to have these conversations. So, you know, if the board's with it, I know I am, so let's go make it happen.
Hey, Doc, go ahead.
So that's what I wanted to hear. So just bring us back the vision for how we get there and what it costs and what the balancing act is, and we'll have to make the call. But, you know, what keeps popping in my head is some years ago, we had, I think no one else on this board was here, but there was conversation about cutting the then called magnet budget, and specifically Dreyfus and was one of them. And a coworker convinced me to go meet with some parents and children from Dreyfus. And what I realized then is they just would not make it anyplace else. They were like such specialized beings, right? No, seriously, right? That they just, so I was like, yes, we need to have that nice space for them to develop their wholeness, right? And I'm concerned that these young people who have been developed pre-K-8 in this inquiry-based learning through the arts program will then have to go someplace else that is not so well prepared to embrace their wholeness, that they will like wither. And I don't want that to happen. So I look forward to the short-term plan for the Conservatory High School and what that will mean to the district, and then also the medium-term plan for expansion, and then the longer-term plan, whether it's inquiry-based through STEM programs or whatever, fine. I just want all children to be able to experience that freedom of learning that my grandchildren are experiencing right now. It's just fantastic. So, thank you.
All right, no more questions? Thank you very much. We need a motion to adjourn the workshop. Motion by Dr. Robbins, second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor, all opposed? Assuming Mrs. Whitfield there, 6-0. The next item is the special meeting.